And then in phase 3, we took on the tackling of the biggest nut of all of how do you get private capital into this thing at mammoth scales. And I'm encouraged by what we were able to do when we focused on the carbon credit as a proxy. And Fakir, thank you for stepping in on that. It is a little disappointing that we couldn't go immediately to our EDA, Economic Development Authority structure that, again, in the Rappahannock River Basin Commission was one of the major supporters of that when we got that legislation changed in the 2019 session of the General Assembly to allow them to do that aggregation of landowner interests. But it's when and Ellen and I were talking about this the other day when if we could have done something differently, we didn't know at the time how expensive that proposition to get that done was going to be. We would have put that in the budget request for the project. We didn't have that in the project, so that's one of the reasons in talking with Secretary Ring and Rob Farrell, the State Forester, we ended up going on this bifurcated approach, and Chandler's firm has been doing this kind of work. They're the largest in the country in terms of what they're doing in the Mississippi Delta. So our goal is still to get to the point where we can do the EDA mechanism, because it's now been factored into the Chesapeake Bay program's policy efforts as well, and it's in our WIP 3 too for Virginia, and it is what we do want to. We want to get that kind of mechanism in place at localities so that we have a way to expand considerably the private financing of this thing, because we obviously know we have private company interests now that they've been coming out of the woodwork as a result of the efforts to control greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a promising future, and I'm glad that it worked the way it did, and I've appreciated having the opportunity to work with all you guys the last 5 years, and Eldon has put up with me a lot, and I've it's just it is time to retire, and so that's what I'm doing, and I wish you guys well in the future.
Well, Greg, you've put up with me and a few of the troublemakers that are on this line, especially when somebody says, I got an idea. And yeah, Greg, we really appreciate it. I don't know if anybody's got any questions for Greg or me on phase 3. I think we've kind of captured where it is. You've got the major reports that are accessible through the River Basin's website. We've got a ton of other documents. So if I've got archived, and Greg, if you get to a point where you're cleaning out computer files and you find one that you think I don't have, send it to me, don't delete it, because there's been one heck of a lot of material generated on this 5 years of project, and we'd be happy to share it. Any questions?
And today, everybody, Eldon and Chandler have been identified I just submitted the last report to the Endowment for the Forestry and Communities on the project yesterday, and identified Eldon and Chandler as being the points of contact at this juncture. So they will be reaching out to you guys and Fakir and Essex and Orange if Orange still wants to play in this in the future.
Yeah, gee, thanks. No, good project, and looking forward to moving to the next stage as we pass through the pandemic disruptions. Okay, with that, Denise Nelson, you ready?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Take it away, Denise.
Wonderful. Thank you for asking me to come talk about this. I know Kevin Burns put a bug in your ear about it, and it's funny because a lot of people on the call actually helped me develop this proposal. So I think it'll be less of a presentation and more of a discussion. So of course, I'm Denise Nelson with the Berkeley Group, and I lead the WIP work for GWRC, and I also support the WIP work for Crater PDC. And right now I'm being bombarded by my 4-year-old. Do you see that I'm on the phone? Can you please leave the room? I'm on the phone. I know. Okay. All right. So, no, I'm using my phone. We've come up with so many different systems of when they're allowed to come in my office and when they're not, and they do not pay attention. And so working on the WIP contracts for the last few years with a bunch of different PDCs, we've been participating with all the other PDCs in work groups. And one of the work groups we decided to set up this year was on training. And part of that is training for locality staff, but also potentially training for homeowners and landowners, and also potentially training for local businesses that are relevant to our work, like septic haulers. So we've had these WIP requirements coming at us, and we're trying to figure out how to tackle them and how to collaborate. And then DEQ, the WIP program, invited us all to learn about the NIFWIF grant program and the different Chesapeake Bay Stewardship Fund programs that they have. And so in January, we learned about the options, and we started thinking, well, could we apply for one of these grants to support the training outreach work group? And we kind of went in a bunch of different directions on how to tackle that. And it ended up, after conversations with NIFWIF, with Ann Jennings, with a lot of people on the line, that we dialed it back and decided to focus more on the landowners and their individual behaviors. And where that came from was in GWRC, we have 4 counties in the city. We have two of those localities are MS4s. There's other schools that are MS4s as well. And 4 of the 5 are their own stormwater authority. So there's differences just across the one PDC on who's doing what and who knows what and what's required and how much outreach they're doing to the landowners. So we thought, well, how about we start with one of the small NIFWIF grants for $50,000 for 1 year, the Planning and Technical Assistance Grant. So we submitted the application. We're still waiting to hear if we'll get it back. But our idea was we look at the MS4s in the area because we know they have annual reports, they have annual action plans where they clearly define the local priorities and the unique local context. And they have to address the 6 minimum controls. Number 1 is public education and outreach. Number 2 is public involvement and participation. So in the MS4 permit world, those 2 are very important. Pollution prevention and things not specifically related to constructing physical BMPs. They're very important. So we thought, well, let's look at what the MS4s are doing and see what's successful. And we can convey the items they've identified as priorities to their neighbors because they're probably a local priority. And maybe we can also convey the successful practices to their neighbors, the other localities, and see what we can do to support, incentivize, help the non-MS4s maybe start instituting some of these public outreach, education, and involvement activities. See if there's something easy they could copy, mail the letter out that says, don't pour your motor oil down the drain, that sort of thing. But then in talking with the PDCs that I, that collaborate with, and the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, the other NGOs, we decided that, this could be easily spread to a larger area than just GWRC. And we also figured out that GWRC and other partners were applying for a NIFWIF grant for a specific project that was physically located in their region, and they didn't want to have GWRC applying for two for their own benefit. So they asked us if we would submit this under the Berkeley Group name, because we're a approved provider, and if we would talk to the neighboring PDCs and get more partners. And I thought that was a great idea because, you know, there are very successful MS4s around the state that we could learn from, and they might have ideas that they're doing that the MS4s and GWRC are not doing. And then also there are some PDCs that don't have any MS4s at all. So we can help the research and the effort identifying local practices and sharing successful practices. You know, going from one PDC to 3 or 4 or 5 is not, you know, doubling or tripling or quadrupling the effort. It's just sharing the information. So in the nutshell, that is the plan, basically, to learn from the MS4s on those first 2 minimum control measures and use this money for my staff's work, because the individual PDCs don't have the capacity to do this research on their own and develop a plan on their own. So that's what I've heard. So the idea is that we do this research and we develop regional plans and share that information with the PDCs. And if there's template letters, if there's website, if there's social media posts, we share all of that where it's locally appropriate. And then hopefully from then on, that's the bulk of the effort. So hopefully from then on, it's just continuing to deliver upon that plan. And I think it'll work because the plan was built upon the MS4, which are required to report annually and reflect on their performance and update. So if we are basing this on the MS4s, well, then anytime they have an update, it will be easy to convey that update into the plan. I would love to spend all day talking about this, but I'll stop there and see if you guys have any questions or comments.
Comments, questions?
I, for one, am very appreciative for Denise and GWRC pursuing this. And I know we had some back and forth and some hemming and hawing, and but I think overall it's it's probably a good thing. And I've long thought that we could learn from the MS4 localities and initiate some of the actions that they
Thank you.
help improve public engagement.
Thank you, John.
And that is a really big part of the WIP contract is public engagement, education, outreach, training, and encouraging them to put landowners to put BMPs on their own land. So this is just a kind of another angle to tackle it.
Hey, Denise, this is Norm.
Hi.
This is not really an off-the-wall question, but have you given any thought to how we may have to make some changes as a result of the current world we live in? One of the things I'm hearing from all of my MS4s right now is that education and outreach and public education is basically ground almost to a complete halt. We've shifted our gears almost entirely to social media right now as the prime source of outreach. And in the early days, even that was difficult because we couldn't get past the firewalls of the PIOs. The message then was COVID, COVID, COVID. And if it wasn't COVID, they didn't want to hear from us. So I'm just wondering if you've given any thought to how we may have to switch gears here a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. If we get the grant, it will start October 1st and it will be for a year. In the first couple of months of that, we'll be analyzing the MS4s and years of their programs to see what's working. And a lot of what I've seen is like you said, there's some social media work, there's some website work that we can do immediately. There's, I mentioned earlier, letters that you mail out to the residents. There will be maybe a little tricky with setting up the booth at an event to give out information or doing stream cleanups, but that stuff like that might not come and be implemented for another year. So I'm not too stressed out about it just yet.
Okay, good. And I'd also, I know you've talked to Corey, and we've got those annual surveys that we've done for quite a while now. So I think that would probably serve as a good backbone for some of the information.
Yes, wonderful. We're very excited about seeing that and sharing that some more.
Yeah, there's also a major push coming out of Maryland now to recognize outreach and education as an official BMP for nutrient credits. It's been looked at over the years, and it's always gotten shut down. We know intuitively there's a linkage that exists.
Right.
The problem has always been trying to establish a numeric to it. I don't know if it's going to work its way through the process again, or if it's just going to die. But I did want to let you know that it is raising its head again.
Good. And that's really why I was excited about this. I had a long conversation with Kevin Utt. I don't know if he can speak now on the line, but he really helped me think about this idea that there are these 6 minimum controls. 2 of them are public outreach and education, and they're required in the MS4 permit because they are so important and valuable, but they're not reflected in the WIP contracts that I've seen so far. So this proposal was trying to target something new that's not already being covered under the WIP contract, but tying to it, of course, with the other WIP requirements to do outreach and education on physical constructed BMPs. But it almost seemed like, why haven't we thought of this before? If we could, the simple thing would be copy and paste from an MS4 and put it somewhere else. We're really going to make a huge impact, even if it's not, like you said, if it's not measurable. It's obviously the state thinks it's important if they put it in the MS4 permit.
Yeah, I agree. But like I said, the hang up has always come, and it has been brought up for many years. It's applying the unfortunate aspects of the bean counting to it is where it usually dies.
Well, I know on all my afternoon walks due to the quarantine that people are not cleaning up after their pets, and I do not want all of that to impair the rivers around here.
I'll make a comment real quick. With us being so reliant on voluntary measures by private property owners to meet our goals, the education outreach piece is very important. And Norm, perhaps we phrase it like that for the rural localities that are opt out, that are doing voluntary measures. We're relying on voluntary measures by private property owners, and we need them to start capturing what they're doing already and help them increase and make them do more.
Yeah, I agree completely with you, John. I think the part of the emphasis needs to be doing some research to figure out exactly numerically what are the benefits. And even if it's a very low number, it's a number at that point. So I would highly encourage Denise as she's working through this, and the other PDCs that are working through this, to see if they can find literature that has some kind of numeric or associated with it, even if it's some kind of percentage of population or something. As I said, that's where it's always died, has been trying to make the bean counters happy.
Right. We're going to try to do what we can. We know that the MS4 permits include reporting on the success rate. And in the NIFWIF program, they ask you for outreach and education. How many people did you reach? How many people with changed behavior, which is a little tricky to document? And how many volunteers do you have participating? But we'll try to track the data, look for metrics. I don't know, like you said, that we'll be able to find something to make the bean counters happy, but hopefully we'll be able to share a lot of positive success stories.
Denise, this is Michelle Edwards. I am on a EPA committee, the Local Leadership Work Group Committee, where we've been working with a consultant to develop kind of like a Watershed 101 suite of tools, presentations, handbooks, PowerPoint slides, all sorts of various things for people to use in reaching out to their elected officials for Bay-related education. And my understanding is it's starting to come to fruition over the next year. And so it would be definitely something to take a look at, because I think that's going to have a lot of good sources in it. I know some of the information I've already received through that, and then some of it is in process, but it's definitely a good place to start, because they've already done, the consultant has already done the work for the overall Bay program in some of these areas.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I'll definitely look into that.
Other questions or comments for Denise? Denise, I'm thinking we're going to want to get this in front of the commission, just so the elected officials hear what you're going to be working on. And so we need to talk about when the most effective time to do that. The September meeting is really going to be before you even get started. December meeting, you are going to be close to finishing that first quarter's worth of work. I don't know what people's thoughts are. Just in listening to the discussion, listening to the presentation, I'm thinking December might be a good time.
You can't see me, but I'm blushing because I'm still just holding out to see if I get the grant. But yeah, I'd love to talk about it whenever you would love to have me.
All right. Well, I think, you know, this is, go ahead.
This is David Nunnally. Just a comment on a recent inquiry that I've been working with. A property owner wanted to build a small pond, which to me was the same as essentially function as a stormwater basin. But the total project would disturb slightly over an acre, which then brought in the stormwater permitting and other things, which was just prohibitively expensive. I think we might want to look at some way to make projects that are intended to improve water quality to make them less burdensome on the administrative side.
I think that's a very good point, David. This proposal I've been talking about focuses really on not constructed projects, but definitely in our GWRC conversations, I'd love to talk about that. I've been going back and forth with a few different people now on getting the specifications for specific BMPs to make sure they're constructed properly, and then they can be reported to the warehouse. But definitely I see your point about removing those regulatory barriers.
Other comments? Questions? Okay. Thank you, Denise. I think we're going to be interested in hearing about this more going forward and give some thought to how the commission and this technical committee can assist. Just in dealing with the outreach and communication functions and the challenges that you face, we all face them. And so, more heads, more ideas, and more opportunities for people to just pass the word along. Word of mouth doesn't sound like too effective a means, but really it can be. So on that note, that kind of brings us to the part of the agenda where we're looking at the meetings ahead. Our next meeting of this group is July 29. I've been trying to keep the agendas, focused on maybe one or two topics, and really haven't got an agenda item for July, but at this point, other than the usual updates, and we need to do a little bit more than that. So if some folks have some suggestions, I'm all ears. And thanks, Denise, for doing this one. Obviously, Sentinel Landscapes will be on the horizon, but that's a little farther out. And continued updates on Healthy Watershed Forests, but we're in a bunch of legal discussions at this point. I don't know that there's going to be much more to talk about between now and the end of July. The September commission meeting, I made mention of a couple of things that were identified for topics at that. The River Stewards Program of FOR, obviously discussion of the scenic river. Also, Tom O'Halloran wants to have a discussion on stream fencing cost share. And what he and I spoke after the meeting, we'd like to try to find a way to maybe do something on site in Madison. I'm not sure how we're going to make that happen, but it's being kicked around. So any of you Upper Basin folks have got some ideas as we go forward. I'm looking at Michelle and John and Deirdre. I think it might be good to expose some of our elected officials to the program, and there are folks that hear about it all the time that really don't even know what it is and never seen it, and so would like to talk about that as we go forward. Other comments? All right. Well, I thank everybody. And Brian Hoffman, you and I have some conversations to have. And Solid Water folks, I'd love to talk some more about some of the things you all are going to be doing in the coming year, and maybe something for technical committee agenda, but certainly for the commission meeting in the Upper Basin in Madison in September. Pat Cody, Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, anything to add for us before we depart?
No, I'll just echo something. Thanks to Greg in all his work. And I know he's going to have a big party down there when things open up, so we'll all come.
Okay, well, we'll all get in a big bus, right?
I say that lies somewhere between promise and threat, but
boy, that would be a bus ride. All right, and we would make sure that David Nunley would have to join us on that bus ride, because he always has an idea to push, such as streamlining building ponds for on farms. And anyway, I won't go any farther on that because that'll send David and me down a rat hole. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you all very, very much. It's always great to be with you. And Greg, thank you for everything.
Happy trails, man.
Yeah, man.
Thank you, Chris. Bon voyage.
See y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.